is back in order. We are at the end of the miscellaneous provision sections, and I believe you had the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we recessed yesterday, I had moved an amendment which would provide a new section to the miscellaneous provision. It will add a new subsection D to Title V GCA, which is the Government Claims Act, and it would read Section 6206D. Approved settlements shall not be subject to fiscal year limitations on authority of government agencies to make full payments in resolution of a claim. And I offered this amendment at the request of the Attorney General, given her actual experience when the Attorney General's office tried to move forward on a settlement, payment of a settlement, and because that settlement wasn't paid prior to the end of the fiscal year, BBMR ruled that it was a prior year obligation. The Attorney General did a legal opinion saying that it's not to be considered a prior year obligation. The Governor's attorney, Sandra Miller, assisted the Attorney General in getting BBMR to recognize that legal opinion, and so as a result, that settlement was paid. We understand that settlements are made to avoid costly litigation, or in some cases just approve these settlements as quickly as possible, and just because the fiscal year ends, it does not mean that that settlement should not be honored. And so some of the discussions yesterday were certainly valid, and as a result, you've recessed us to come back this morning, and the Attorney General is present in the hall to answer any questions any of our colleagues may have, but I still maintain my same points with respect to why this amendment is being moved, and I ask for consideration of the body.
Thank you. Any senator wish to be heard on this? Did you have your hand up, Senator? Okay. No, but on this, no, on the Respicio amendment, Senator Espaldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, yesterday when this was proffered, again, had to take a look and try to understand what this was for, because it seems that within our laws right now under the Government Claims Act and even in the establishment of the Government Claims Fund, that this is a no-brainer. But after talking to, and this is probably the practice that has been going on throughout the past however long. But you know, after talking with the Attorney General and speaking about her concerns, bottom line is this is more just to make it explicitly clear of that any settlements by the government are not subject to fiscal year. And I think that the Attorney General has had problems in the past, so I guess this amendment is just to make sure that it's very explicit that any settlement of claims is not subject to fiscal year limitations. So I definitely rise in full support. It's almost a redundancy, or at least in terms of what the Government Claims Act does, and so redundancy at times. I remember a colleague of ours on the floor used to always say, what's the harm in just making it explicitly clear and being redundant in what the law should be? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I jokingly almost want to call a point of personal privilege and to say that this amendment is redundant. It is necessary. I'm just joking. I'm jokingly saying I almost want to call a point of personal privilege. Because
and I was referring to former Senator Shimizu, who...
No, you were referring to the amendment, that the amendment is redundant and not necessary, but my contention is that it's an experience that the Attorney General had. She believes that this amendment will prevent those same experiences, and Senator Espaldon is absolutely right in his legal mind that settlements should not be subject to fiscal year-end limitations. The Attorney General wrote an opinion saying the same thing, and so my moving this, although it's being categorized as redundant, it's necessary, so I thank the gentleman for his support.
Any other senator wish to be heard on the amendment? Any objection to the amendment? Senator Uggan Senator Uggan and others have also. I believe Senator Uggan and Senator Brant McCready has one. Do you have one to add to this section? Senator Uggan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, I did request the assistance of the legal counsel to look into a particular matter, so I'm going to ask the consideration of the chair if by any chance we can bookmark this specifically for a proposed amendment subsequent to the discussion. Okay, I just don't want you to close this chapter and then put in a request. Okay.
Senator Morrison sent me a note that he's coming in at 9:45, and he has an amendment, and so.
No, I
and the
understand.
Speaker has one. Who has another? Anybody else have amendments for this section? Brent? Senator McCready?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I have an amendment. I think
It's been distributed.
I would think it's line 26, and it would be page 1. What page are we on, Mr. Chair?
129.
129. So it'd be line 26, page 129. And if I'm wrong, then could legal just
Well,
make
yeah,
it technical?
just a section, and they'll put it where it.
Still find a different page. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My amendment reads as follows: Members of the legislature prohibited from traveling at government expense. Notwithstanding any provision of law, members of the legislature are prohibited from receiving government funds from any autonomous, semi-autonomous, and non-autonomous agencies and public corporations of the government of Guam for travel expenses, per diem allowances, and expenses pursuant to 23104E, Chapter 23, Title 5, GCA. And like you said, everybody has the amended copy. I will wait for the either objection or there may be an objection, I'm not sure, and there may be some of our colleagues that speak on this. So I'll wait for that before I kind of make the compelling argument of why I'm doing this with some specific numbers. But I'm not sure what the body is going to say, so I'll wait for the body to discuss this, and then I'll explain it when it's time. I'll explain it when it's time.
Is there any objection to this section? There's been an objection. Oh, you recognize Senator Espaldon. It was distributed. It's been distributed. Yes. Senator Espaldon, you are recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I go down the road to rationalize my objection, I'd need to ask the author of this amendment a question, if he would if he would yield. And that is, the way this reads is that notwithstanding any provision of law, members of the legislature are prohibited from receiving government funds from any autonomous, semi-autonomous, and non-autonomous agencies and public corporations of the government of Guam for travel expenses, etc. The question I have is this a limitation? According to this language, there's no limitation of us spending our own budgets, our own funds within our budgets to do any travel. Is that the intent here?
Do you yield,
Yes.
Senator Mc?
Yes, the intent is to eliminate travel from our budgets.
I believe Senator
And
Espaldon's question is the way that
using
you've written
government-
this
Well, the whole intention is to using taxpayers' funds to travel, period, taxpayers' funds. So that's why we added all these government agencies that would not allow, would prohibit the possibility to travel. So it's all government. This is taxpayers' funds.
I believe his question was, the way that you've written it, it did not include legislative office funds.
Correct. Basically, yeah, and that, no need to restate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So I'll make a technical amendment and add that in. That's what.
We need to see your amendment.
I believe that's a, we'll take this, correct it. Well,
I stated my intention on the floor.
why don't you rewrite this, and I'll give you a few minutes. There are others who have other amendments. Anybody else have an amendment to this section? Any other, Senator Rodriguez, you? Okay. Senator, I think you distributed yours yesterday.
Special recognition license plate. This goes hand in hand with
Yes,
this is a
yes.
That's a section. All right, this chapter.
It's distributed. It's distributed already. All right, Senator Tom has an amendment, but he's going to have to get it copied and distributed. Okay. No. Get to them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment that's being passed out now. This is regarding the Special Recognition Veterans Plate. Now, yesterday, we had actually placed in the pass-through appropriations a $5,000 appropriation to fund the manufacture of the master template for these Special Recognition Veterans License Plates. And the amendment that's being passed around basically are the sections, new sections that will be added into GCA. This was actually introduced as Bill 334, introduced by myself, Senator Frank B. Uggan, and Senator Tina Muñoz Barnes. And it had a public hearing. The committee report was actually reported out. And but we would like to put this on as an amendment to this bill. And basically what it does, what this amendment would do is it adds a new section to Chapter 7, Title 16, and defines what is a Special Recognition Veterans License Plate. And that plate actually will be special license plates that will be given to recipients of the Distinguished Service Cross, that is, well, actually to any recipients of a Medal of Honor, which I'm not aware of any on Guam. The Distinguished Service Cross, I know that there's two currently living on Guam, and the Navy Cross and Air Force Cross. Silver Star, I believe we have about 10 recipients who are living on Guam, and the Bronze Star with the V device. And in addition to that, the master template for the Purple Heart Medal. Now, these are called Special Recognition Veterans License Plates because the valor that was demonstrated in combat certainly sets these recipients apart from all other soldiers who have participated in combat activities. The color and the design of the plate is actually available, but if there's any final tweaking to be done, it'll be between Department of Revenue and Taxation and the Guam Veterans Office in consultation with the Guam Veterans Commission. The Guam Veterans Commission is comprised of representatives of the various military organizations, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy. So everybody will have their input into this. And then, of course, the language here that funding is hereby appropriated from the fiscal year 2017 Tourist Attraction Fund. Now, Section 3 of this amendment here is something that maybe legal counsel needs to review to see whether we need Section 3, because the $5,000 was actually already appropriated in the TAF pass-through section that we discussed yesterday. So, Mr. Chairman, this is the amendment that I'm proffering to be placed in this chapter. Thank you.
Senator, you mentioned that it was introduced in bill form. Did you conduct a hearing on it?
That's correct, and it was Bill 334. It had a public hearing and has a committee report that has been reported out.
Perfect. I just wanted to make it clear to all the other members that provisions like this, you haven't had a hearing. So any objection to this with legal counsel looking at whether or not that one section is necessary since there's already a $5,000 pass-through?
No objection.
Senator Dennis Rodriguez, are you all right?
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I have an amendment that I'd like to place. This is Bill 184, Mr. Chair, that had a public hearing and now is eligible to be able to be placed on this budget bill. What this does, Mr. Chair, is that in May of 2010, this body, which I wasn't a member of yet, but a lot of the members who are here today were members of that body, had passed a law that modernized the positions, the public health positions for public health inspectors. And in an effort to improve the services of this division to the people of Guam, a law was passed, and a good colleague, Senator Frank Uggan, who pushed that law, was successful in getting it through. 6 years later, though, the law hasn't been effectuated. There's been a lot of back and forth between public health and DOA. And so, in our effort, the committee's effort to pursue this and ensure that we finally, once and for all, be able to assist the Division of Environmental Health carry out their mandates, we have now trying to move this law forward. As you can see, Mr. Chair, the funding source that has been identified is the Environmental Health Fund, as well as the Sanitary Inspection Revolving Fund, both of whom their enabling legislations allow for the use for employees, for recruitment. And so I'm asking my colleagues to please support this measure.
On the Rodriguez amendment, Senator Tom Ada, Senator Espaldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I certainly stand in support of the proposed amendment. However, I do have a concern about section or paragraph I-6. I-6 says that the incentive pay shall be retroactive to the time the environmental officer positions were established, provided the employee held such. Unless we quantify that, we don't know how far back this goes. It's something like remember when the meritorious pay, somebody decided to go all the way back to 1991, and it was like, whoa, we weren't expecting. So I'm just concerned about something like this. We're authorizing it to be retroactive without any idea of what amount we are talking about.
I'll take that, Mr. Chair. If
Senator Rodriguez, do you wish to address that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much for a good colleague for that question. So when this law was passed, there was after that was passed, there was 3 employees as of today that would have qualified for this incentive pay. They were the ones who obtained the certifications, and those 3 employees, Mr. Chair, would cost the total of $60,271 if we were to allow for the retroactive pay for those 3 individuals. And that's covering fiscal year 2014 to fiscal year 2016.
Thank you. So I think in that case, then probably some of those specifics should be put in here, that it shall be retroactive to no earlier than 2014. At least we have a specific date that it will go back to, and shall not exceed a certain amount.
Yes.
Can we work on that? Any other comments?
Okay, if I could add to, Mr. Chair, just to add to that. So the law was passed in May of 2010, and it took us another law in 2013 to kind of rectify the issues that DOA, HR, and public health were having. And so the reason why we're starting with fiscal year 2014 is when we've actually laid the groundwork for this incentive pay to be able to be effectuated at that time. And so that's why it's only from 2014 to this date.
Yeah, and I think why Senator Ada is saying it should be clear that it's from 2014 so that nobody up there says it should go back to 2010. So while Senator Espaldon is speaking, if you can speak with legal counsel about how to insert that here, then we can close this out.
Actually, that was one of my main concerns as well, the whole retroactive issue. And as I understand it now, that the financial impact for the retro is $60,000. The following question is really what's the impact going forward, at least for this fiscal year? Because then the question needs to be asked is whether there are any funds, the Environmental Health Fund or the Sanitary Inspection Revolving Fund. And of course, it does say subject to the availability of funds, but if there are no funds, then I would imagine that it's implied that once the funds are there, then it will be put towards this incentive pay. And just want to verify if that is the question, and maybe even ask your committee, Mr. Chair, whether those funds are available for use for this purpose.
Senator Rodriguez, do you wish to yield to that question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, for fiscal year 2017, there are 9 employees that may qualify. I say may because unless they obtain the certification within the fiscal year, then they would qualify. And let's say they do all qualify, the impact would be $79,931. And I would submit as well that the funds that have been identified are sufficient enough to be able to carry these impacts moving forward.
There are sufficient funds in the Environmental Fund.
Okay.
For both the retro and for this fiscal year.
Okay, because that would be
Sanitary Inspection Fund.
about $140,000.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
They have about 5 times that.
Okay.
4 times that.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And with the caveat, Counsel, that on the top of on 6 that it be clear that it's just FY 2016. I mean 2014. Okay. So is that okay if Council makes that amendment?
So on that amendment first, that will be the Tom Ad amendment.
Yes, on the Tom Ad amendment to 14. Any objection to the 14? It only going back to FY 14. and on allowing council to make that amendment. Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have two items. The first is that, the intent of all this is to provide incentive pay, and incentives are supposed to precipitate action. And I just have an issue with creating incentive pay and then making it retroactive. I can understand incentive pay prospective, but incentive pay retroactive, we're creating an incentive, but then we're going back and we're paying you for having already received it. So maybe I have an issue maybe with us going retroactive on incentive pay on number 6. The other thing I have an issue with in this amendment is item 2, where it reads, provided it is reasonable, justified, and relevant to their duties and responsibilities, the Department of Public Health and Social Services may, at its discretion, include one or more other certifications in addition to the Registered Environmental Health Specialist certification, the Registered Sanitarian certification, or its equivalent for the Environmental Public Health Officer to receive the incentive pay. So basically what we're saying in item 2 is if Public Health finds a certification that they want to validate for this incentive, they can just go ahead and validate it, and they can thereafter allow the employees to get it, and we'll have to give them another 15% incentive pay bump. So really, because it's discretionary, it's open-ended, you can add on almost any kind of certification there. You do have to clear the reasonable, justified, and relevant test, but that's very open-ended. And the fiscal impact of those additional certifications, whatever they may be, is quantitatively unknown. We don't know how much more that's going to be bumping up the cost. So my first action I'd like to take is to make a motion to strike item 2 of the amendment.
The Nicholas amendment is to strike 2. Who wishes to address that issue? Any objection? You wish to address
Yes, I wish to. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, I don't see a problem with this with number 2 being there, or even with it being stricken out. I just want to be able to address that allowing public health to add an additional requirement is not a bad thing. It makes it where the employee must have another certification in order to get the 15%. So it's not an additional 15% on top of the first 15%. I just want to make that clear. So I don't see a reason why it hurts to have this language there. It makes that employee. I don't want to say make it harder to get incentive pay, but it gives that employee more value, if I may say. So, I don't see a reason why how it's going to affect it remaining here. So I would object to that removal.
Any other senator wish to be heard on this? Senator Espaldon? And then Senator Ada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that the mover of the amendment made a good point in terms of it's not clear in here whether for each certification there will be an extra 15%, even though the previous speaker said that that's not the case. It's not clear. And until that's clarified, we don't know that. It'd be hard to support opposing this amendment to strike this unless it's clarified.
If I may, Mr. Chair, it reads clear. If I can just read it to the body again. Number 2, provided is reasonable, justified, and relevant to their duties and responsibilities, the Department of Public Health and Social Services may, at its discretion, include one or more certification in addition to the REHS, RS, or its equivalent for the Environmental Public Health Officer to receive the incentive pay. So it's in addition to the Registered Environmental Health Specialist and the Registered Sanitarian that you would need to have that in addition, whatever else requirement that public health places on them, it must be in addition to those two to be able to receive that 15% incentive pay. And we can, if the senator would like, he can add additional language to ensure that that is the case. But that is the intention.
The senator would like, but then again, without any proper amendment, I would vote for the striking of this, and I'm not going to make that amendment.
The motion is to strike this, and do you wish some time to work with the two of them to clean this up? Okay, why don't we'll set this aside for a second and allow them to work on this. Do you have another issue?
Well, it was item 6 also, Mr. Chairman, and again, I can see the idea behind incentivizing something in order to encourage the employees to acquire it. If they had already acquired it, that's great. But incentive pay, incentive retroactive, for me, I just have a really hard time making sense of that in my mind. You either create the incentive to encourage others to get it, if some have already had it, that's great. And then going forward with the incentive pay, they can increase their salary prospectively. But to go back and all of a sudden create a retroactive, I mean, for example, Mr. Chairman, we have teachers who are required to get certified. That's part of their job. And I would really proffer that being certified as a sanitary environmental health inspector, the certifications really should be required as part of your job. Unless one day someone's going to come in here and introduce a bill to make teacher certifications an incentive and make it retroactive to when they started teaching. Lord knows, that's going to be quite an obligation. So perhaps the incentive prospectively is something that I can get behind, but to make an incentive pay and then make it retroactive for a certification on a job, I mean, that really should be required. You really should be certified if you're going to be a health inspector. So I would like to make a motion to strike the retroactive portion of the amendment and strike item 6.
Okay, let's take a few. We'll allow you guys, the three of you, to work this out. Was there another amendment? Did you have an additional amendment to this section? Okay. Try to work on 2, and the retroactive on this one, as I understand it from the mover, Senator Sinicolas, was that this law was passed in 2010 to provide for it. There was a 4-year period where DOA and public health were trying to work things out. When it was finally cleared up in 2013 and was to be effective in 2014, it still hadn't been addressed. And so for those that got it as a result of the action in 2010, they're not asking for the 2010 to 2014. They're only asking from 2014 when we cleared it up in 2013 here.
So perhaps then it's more so language. Perhaps we can say the incentive pay shall be effective to the time the environmental public health office positions were established, as opposed to retroactive, or is that just play on words?
That even goes even back further. And so,
effective to the time the environmental public health officer positions were established and the incentive was authorized.
And Mr. Chair, I think that's why we've asked the legal counsel to make it
why don't the three of you work on that? Okay, thank you. We'll go back to Senator Brandt McCready. Have you distributed your revised?
I believe so, yes. So my revised amendment, Mr. Chair, and I may have another one, I'm not sure, But members of the legislature are prohibited from traveling at government expense, notwithstanding any other provision of law. Members of the Legislature are prohibited from receiving government funds for any autonomous, semi-autonomous, non-autonomous agencies and public corporations of the government of Guam for travel expenses, per diem allowances and expenses pursuant to 23104E, Chapter 23, Title 5, GCA, and prohibited from using any funds appropriated to Legislature, including office funds for travel expenses, per diem allowances and expenses pursuant to 2304E, Chapter 23, Title 5.
Thank you. On the amendment, I saw Senator Tom Adler's hand go up. And did you wish to speak to? After Tom? Senator Espaldon. So I have Ada Munya-Barnes Espaldon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I know that when the mover of the amendment started up first, he says he wants to hear what everybody has to say, then he'll explain his rationale for the amendment. And it seems that's kind of act backwards. That maybe really could help us to understand his rationale as to why why is it targeted just to the legislative branch. So I would like to hear his rationale for that.
Senator
Thank
McCready.
you, Mr. Chair. As people in this body knows that I introduced this bill last year. We had a public hearing. Nobody showed up at the public hearing in support or in opposition of this measure. So I took it a little further and did some research. This is the branch that we work in. We don't work in any other branch. This is the branch that I know. This is the branch that I was elected to fill a seat by the people of Guam. We know when it comes to these types of months, when we're in the budget, how short we are when it comes to cash. You yourself, Mr. Chair, rightfully so, I'm not saying wrongfully so, cut $60 million off the projected budget. You cut, I think, $33 million off of the projected budget last session. We don't have the cash. We have outstanding obligations for this government when you talk about compact impact reimbursements. Well, let's just talk on the federal level. Compact impact reimbursements, I think, when I last checked last year, was at almost $156 million. I think we get reimbursed 15 or 16 million, give or take. We have an unfunded tax liability of $56 million that the public auditor just informed us of, which is the EITC. We have a federal receiver for the dump that we're still paying. We have a prison that has over 800 prisoners, which is also under a consent decree that we've had to infuse $5 million last year just to get them, not to get that cloud removed over their head, but just to get them on par so we wouldn't be in federal receivership of the prison. We're talking millions of dollars. So when I look at those things, when I look at GMH, when I look at public safety, I mean, here we go again with public safety. When I look at the shorting of cars, the shortage of manpower, the shortage of revenues, bullets, flap jackets, uniforms, officers getting beaten up. When I look at those types of things, and then I look at, because the good senator asked, and then I look at some of these travel vouchers. And I've been here 4 years, so I go back to 4 years. Some of the guys in the Senate weren't here 4 years ago, but I'm not going to mention names. And I'll just pick them out randomly. Purpose of travel, SARA Symposium. Does the SARA Symposium, did they bring back any federal receivership dump money? Did they bring back any EITC mandates that the federal government will pay? Did they bring back any compact impact monies? Research or participate in the Pacific Education Conference. We have a Native Hawaiian, the 14th Annual Native Hawaiian Convention. I'm from Hawaii. And with all due respect, I'm not worried about the Native Hawaiians. I'm worried about the Native Chamorros. When we are sitting on that airplane, and let me just use, I mean, I can go on and on. The list is humongous. I can go on and on all day long. What do we have tangible to bring back to Guam when we travel? That a phone call. Or travel, but travel at your own expense. Why can't we do that? We are in a tight situation here. Yes, I remember when the Senate budgets were $1 million per office, and you could lease a car as a senator. Am I wrong? Am I right? I'm correct, right? That was 20 years ago. You could lease a car as a senator, and your budget was about $1 million. Things change. You know, when you got a family of 5, and let's just say a family, a teacher and a police officer, saves up all year. Family of 5 goes on a trip. They have to save up all year for that trip. And we have someone going to some off-island conference. That individual and his wife paid for the family of 5's plane fare and that senator. When they land and they stay in the hotel, that taxpayer who saved up all year paid for their hotel and the senator's hotel. When they're eating dinner, that family of 5 pays for their family of 5 and the dinner of the senator. And you say, and when I talk about the dinner and the hotel and all that, that's per diem. I would imagine. I've never came back to the legislature to ask them to pay my bills for travel. But in per diem costs alone, we have anywhere from $50 to almost $2,500 for trips. Some per diems, we charge the taxpayers $220 a day. I don't know about you, Mr. Chair, and I'm not directing anything at you. I'm just addressing the chair. I don't spend $220 a day on Guam for per diem to eat. Why would I do it off island? Why would I leave here and spend $220 a day? And so when someone asks, what's the rationale behind this? It's in the numbers. I'm not smart enough to lie here. I'm not smart enough to pull the wool over some of the eyes of some of the senators here. I'm not. I'm a public school guy. Not with all due respect to public schools, but I'm just saying I'm an average guy. I look at the numbers and I make comparisons. And if I have to, I'll go down the line. But Mr. Chair, it does not add up. We cannot keep, it was said here, maybe 2 or 3 people said, we cannot keep spending. We have to stop spending. I think it was the good Senator Underwood. If there's not enough food to go around, you have to stop spending. So that's my rationale. And to throw some shade over the committee chairperson, Senator Respicio, I never asked him to report this out. It wasn't negligence on his part or he dragged this through because he didn't want. I didn't ask him to. But it has had a public hearing. Now, there was no one at the public hearing. This lasted about 30 seconds. So I don't know what the committee report would say, you know. But the numbers speak for itself. The numbers do speak for itself. And I know right now I'm probably the least popular guy in here. I may only have 3 more months in the legislature, but I'm going to use those 3 months to do whatever I can to make sure that things like this don't happen every day. So I may have another amendment, depends on how this goes. And I guess I would get to, this is my open, this wouldn't be my close, right? So this is my open. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. Chairman, he was responding to my question, so I guess
Correct.
I can continue, right? And so I appreciate that the previous speaker has done some homework insofar as the expenditures that have been made by the legislative branch. And I presume I'm correct, that those numbers and the reasons for the travel was just for the legislative branch. But he was painting the picture that, there's a shortage here in the government, there's a deficit there and all that stuff. And so if we're really concerned about reducing expenses, the government's expenses, then why don't we apply this prohibition to the government? Why just a half-hearted attempt and apply it just to the legislature? And to me, it seems that it's a half-hearted attempt because it's election time. The electorate always has needed a dog to kick. That has always been the legislature.
Point of personal privilege,
No,
Mr. Chair.
no, wait a minute. I didn't say anything about you.
I introduced this bill last year.
Senators, please.
And so it seems that, so in my mind, I'm wondering, is this a pandering to the voters bill or amendment? Or are we really concerned about reducing the expenses to the government? In fact, that's why I never supported reducing just the pay just for the legislature's elected officials, because when you compare that number to the pay raise for all the elected officials in government, the savings pales. So we're really concerned about reducing the expenses to government. Then let's make that prohibition. If he applies this to the entire government, I certainly will support it. But in my mind right now, this is pandering to the electorate. Thank you.
Senator Espaldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I understand what the good senator of this, the proposer of this amendment is trying to do, at least according to his arguments. However, I'm not sure that's the wisest move to try to, I guess, decrease government expenses. Because, Mr. Chairman, when I was back in my first term, and I was the chairman of 2 very broad committees with responsibilities covering, probably 60% of government operations. We're talking everything from tourism to military affairs to foreign affairs and this and that. I won't even go down that name, the title of that office, of committees that I held. But just suffice it to say, there was a lot of responsibilities. During that time was a time that the federal government announced the military realignment plans. And there was supposed to be a buildup from 2010 to 2014, right, in which the relocation of the Marines from Okinawa would come to Guam. That was a very limited time frame, and it would have caused a lot of social impact without any real studies behind it. On top of it, a lot of the money that was being put into this military realignment was going to come from the federal government and Japanese government, and it still is. We traveled. I had to use my funds as oversight chair for this broad committee to try to understand what this realignment would do and what would be contributed outside the fence in terms of, are there any federal monies coming here to help us with our infrastructure? Are there any federal monies coming out here to help us with other concerns that would definitely impact us because of this realignment? I had to travel to D.C. to find out that no, there is no money. Maybe. I mean, there were some very vague promises, but they were vague, and there was no absolute, yes, this is what we're going to put in to on the outside the fence. But it was worthy to find that out, that we weren't assured anything from the federal government. And that caused me to really, it caused me distress. Because if there was going to be this huge military buildup, and I think at the time they were talking $15 billion, and none of that, for the most part, or at least very little of that, would trickle outside the fence to help the locals, the local economy, and to lessen the social impacts, then what are we going to do? The question is, how are we going to approach this? I then had to figure out, is there a possibility to take a look and speak with the government of Japan? It was a long shot, but long story short, I was able to get an audience with the foreign minister of Japan. I used my own office funds to do that. In that conversation with the foreign minister, and I know I didn't get the blessings of Washington, D.C., because we weren't supposed to talk to another government entity, but it didn't matter to me, because my concern was, of all this money that was supposed to be spent on this military buildup, the question was, why is none of this being appropriated for outside the fence projects, for our infrastructure? I was chairman of infrastructure at that time. When we're talking water, power, sewer, at the time trash was still a big issue and whatnot. Japan had pledged nothing. In fact, their stance was any money they put in was going to go towards all projects inside the base, on the base. Because I was lucky enough to get that meeting and at least explain the challenges that we faced, the local community faced with this whole military buildup, I was able to get a commitment from the Japanese government through the foreign minister at the time that they would change their policy in terms of how to expend all their funds, and they would allow for some of their contributions to this military buildup to be used outside the fence. And at that time, that figure was around $780 million for our infrastructure. And this is because, and it was not, and this was a meeting that you could not just go on the internet and try to communicate, that you can email them and try to hopefully they can answer back. It was not a discussion that you could write a letter on and hope to get the same kind of results. Sometimes you need to sit in front of another person who has the authority to make that decision on our behalf and have them look into your eyes and understand the real need and the real sincerity of what we are arguing for on behalf of our island. And I believe that's what happened on that day in my meeting with the foreign minister, because their policy did change. And in follow-up, yes, it may have not been that same day, but a time after that, I did get confirmation from the Japanese government that the money was put in, or was basically transferred over to the federal government, and it was then up to the federal government to figure out how to disperse all this. The point I'm trying to make, Mr. Chairman, is that sometimes we do need to go and meet these people who have the ability to make decisions on our behalf, for the betterment on our behalf, and look at them straight in the eye and speak with them with the sincerity of our heart to drive home the point, to have them understand, whether it be by our own body language, the look in our eyes, the intonation of our voice, to really understand the depth of the concerns we have that these outside influences may have effect on the lives of our local people. So to me, to ban all travel for whatever reason, kind of almost shuts us off and isolates us from having that kind of interpersonal communication with them. Even in Washington, D.C., it was good to be able to go up to the Pentagon and talk with the people in the Department of Defense. At the highest level back then, it was Mr. Workman, who still, I believe, is working on this whole realignment thing, as well as some of the generals, getting their perspective and their understanding. Because, Mr. Speaker, even though we have CODEL, congressional delegations that come out to Guam and they meet with us for what, 30 minutes? And that's about it. There is no real meaningful discussion in terms of what we're speaking about, in terms of our concern, right? And so I think, and this is the reason why I would have to object. There are times when it's very necessary to travel off island. At that time, and I'm probably the good chairwoman at this point of tourism will agree with me. There were instances back then when I was chairman of tourism where I was asked to go to some of these destinations that we market to, because in that culture, in that mindset, a lot of times there is a very high respect for, say for example, GVB. If they're accompanied by a public official, there's a comfort level that's saying, okay, the Guam Visitors Bureau has the support of the legislative body and the government, right, to be able to make any kind of contracts or negotiate any kind of transactions with these entities in these foreign countries, whether it's Japan, whether it's Korea, and whatnot. There is a certain level of comfort to those entities when some public officials travel with our delegations. And so with that, Mr. Chair, again, the good mover of this amendment says there's nothing that's brought back. Some of it is very intangible, but a lot of times it's information that we can then use to try to figure out what is the strategy then going forward in terms of addressing some of the issues that these outside influences create for our own island. And for that purpose, Mr. Chairman, I oppose this amendment.
Thank you very much, Senator Munya-Barnes, and then Senator Underwood.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, as I look at this amendment and I hear the presentation by the previous speaker, who was the former oversight chair of tourism, and you yourself, Mr. Chair, have been that oversight member too. We look at these missions or these trips or these trade missions, and we see what could we obtain to look at bringing new resources into our economy. And Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chair, I just want to share with you that we don't even have to look very, very far. Just recently, the Pacific Asia Travel Association, which is called PATA International, that works with 105 economies around the world, 41 chapters, with the highest level of tourism experts and governments in the world, came to our island of Guam. This is an organization that was founded 65 years ago, with Guam being one of the founding members. But I want to share with you, and you heard of this because you were at that PATA summit that really had a major impact on Guam, because it was the chairman's presentation that he shared that he wanted to make sure that he put the Pacific back in the P of PATA, and that it was through the efforts of not just Guam Visitors Bureau, but the request of Guam Visitors Bureau, the administration, and the invitation to the policymakers is to see how do we get an association of this magnitude to assist and help our island. And it was through the efforts, Mr. Chair, that we worked closely to, that we presented last year to the PATA International Association, reminding them that Guam was a founding member and a part of their body, and that we had some requests to come and look and come and see how they could promote and advocate for not just our island of Guam, but for our island of Micronesia, and to promote the blue continent, so that visitors around the world could look at untapped and pristine destinations that were never seen before. And believe it or not, a lot of folks still don't know this part of the region. And because of that advocation by all the governments, by all the administration and the legislature, we went and we bid it to have that summit here, and we won, and we did. And because of that, Mr. Chair, you and I know that a team of experts came. You've been trying to push a cruise industry for many years, and we have been working so closely in getting action items that we as a people could do to bring a new industry into our island as it relates to the cruise industry. And some of them, some of the folks out there said, no, it's impossible. You can't work on building a terminal and ports and having these big ships come in and hold port here. We don't have the terminal. We don't have the feasibility. But it's through the collaboration of PATA Micronesia and PATA International and the works with the legislature and our colleagues here, not just me as oversight, and the administration, that we said, okay, come and see us, come and help with us, come and work with Micronesian Cruise Association that encompasses all of the representatives of Micronesia, and see what you can do. And because of that, we were able to bring experts here to do an assessment, and because of that, we will have the presentation done with the action items needed for us to move forward to bring new industries here. To bring that new industry here. And also, based on that, Mr. Chair, we were able to work closely with the Pacific Asia Travel Association's Director of the Pacific, Mr. Chris Flynn, because of that summit, to talk to us and report to us regarding capacity purchasing agreements, to work closely with the airlines, to look at this region to see how we can bring air transportation to this region without us having to pay exorbitant rates. To go to Saipan right now, Mr. Speaker, to get on a plane, it's going to cost us almost over $300. 20 years ago, it probably cost us $80. And when that presentation was done, we knew that we need to continue to move forward and work with this organization so that we could realize that there are solutions out there to bring maybe even new carriers from the region to help not just our island, but our brothers and sisters in Micronesia, so that we could be able to work our economies around this Pacific and Micronesian region and talk about bringing resources into our island. So, Mr. Chair, when the good senator shares about not being able to bring results back, I'm going to have to step up to the plate and differ with that. If we are out of sight, we are out of mind. If we do not make a presence, there are other governments and agencies out there who are fighting for the same tourist industry dollars that we are fighting for just to bring the visitors in. We don't even have to look far. And we need to be able to find new opportunities, to investigate and work with new regions so that we can improve upon who we are as an island destination. So I share the same concerns, Mr. Speaker, with the previous speaker, and I'm just hoping that the good senator will reconsider this, because this amendment will further take away from the opportunities to bring new resources into our community. And there are a lot of solutions that we can work with, but we all have to be able to realize that sometimes we have to pay our share in order to make sure that others out there realize what we have here to offer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Muñoz-Barnes. Senator Underwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question to the, I want to pose to the author of the amendment.
Please. Addressing the chair.
Addressing the chair, yes. And my question is, approximately how much are you anticipating in the savings? And I'm asking that question because the way this is written, the other agencies, autonomous, semi-autonomous, and non-autonomous agencies and public corporations of the government are prohibited from providing travel funds for members of the legislature. And so if they are prohibited from legislature is prohibited from receiving funds from those agencies, that doesn't necessarily, for travel, that doesn't necessarily mean that those funds that are from those agencies are not going to be spent by the respective agencies. So I'm asking you, approximately how much are you anticipating in savings here?
Thank you.
I yield.
Last year, the savings would be a total number of $86,296.13. You have $29,927.20 for airfare, $43,677.48 for per diem, $12,691.45 for miscellaneous. That comes up to $86,000. I do not have the numbers for this current year, not the fiscal year, just this current year, calendar year. Last term, the total expenditures were $111,743.46. So, I mean, it's ironic. If I could just add to that answer, and by no means is this answer pandering, but it's ironic how we have a $200,000 shortfall for public safety, and the total cost of what we expend is almost $200,000. So, I mean, that's just a little comparison, but that's what we're looking at. I think the $112,000 term, the two terms that we had a term ago, this next term, I think, will exceed the numbers from last term.
Thank you. Senator, anything further? Do you wish to speak on this amendment? No?
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? You may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all of the comments made by my colleagues. There was one comment made that I thought was an insult to me and my family, which pandering. But I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. I have too much respect for the senator. Obviously, it's not reciprocated, but I'm not asking for a reciprocation. So, Mr. Chair, I've given the numbers. There's been an objection. I would like to call for the vote, and I would like to have a roll call. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by raising your hand.
I ask for a roll call.
You need 3.
We don't have everyone in the the session hall right now. But,
There's a quorum.
no, we don't have everyone. Could I take a quick 30-second recess?
Yeah, come on back in. Yes.
I may have one more amendment. So
I understand.
Senator Tom Atta. Senator Tom Atta, nay. Senator Tony Atta. Senator Tony Atta, nay. Senator Uggan. Senator Uggan, aye. Senator Blas. Senator Blas, nay. Vice Speaker Cruz.
Nay.
Vice Speaker Cruz, nay. Senator Espaldon. No. Senator Espaldon, nay. Senator McCready. Yes. Senator McCready, aye. Senator Morrison. No. Senator Morrison, nay. Senator Muñoz Barnes. No. Senator Muñoz Barnes, nay. Senator Respicio. No. Senator Respicio, nay. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Rodriguez, aye. Senator Sinicolas. Yes. Senator Sinicolas, aye. Senator Torres. Yes. Senator Torres, pass. Senator Underwood. Yes. Senator Underwood, aye. Speaker Wampat. Speaker Wampat, nay. Senator Torres. Senator Torres, pass. Senator Torres. Senator Torres, nay.
The votes of 5 ayes, 10 nays. The motion fails.
Marissa, Dennis, Brett, Frank Uggan, and Mike.
Senator
Marissa, Mike, Dennis.
Senator McCready, you have a second one? Senator McCready?
thank you, Mr. Chair. In anticipation of that amendment not going through, I have another one. And this would, I do believe it's been passed out. Yes, it has been passed out. So this is reporting requirements for legislative travel. Each member of Legislatura shall publish 10 days before the end of each fiscal year the total amount of all government funds that such member used to travel to a newspaper of wide distribution.
On that motion, anyone wish to speak? Senator Espaldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess one comment and maybe a question. We'll go with the question first. Each member of the legislature shall publish 10 days before the end of each fiscal year in a newspaper, basically, of all the funds that they use. The question is, will a press release do, or does it have to be a paid ad? Because even if we issue a press release, there's no guarantee that it will be published.
Senator McCready.
I think Senator Nicholas might have an amendment, and I think it would work. I'm not sure, but he just talked to me about a possible amendment. So
Yeah, but the question was, is it a paid ad or is a press release from the office sufficient?
that was the question that Senator Nicholas posed to me on the side. We could do a press release. I would rather not spend the money, so we could do a press release if the proffer would like to amend it that way, and we can also put it on the legislative website, which Senator Nicholas suggested.
It is, I
It's up to
believe our
the-
travel is on
I don't think
on the site already.
I don't think it's readily available like this.
Okay.
So,
They-
but
do you have-
I think
okay.
Senator Espaldon.
So it doesn't
amend
have
it.
to be a paid ad. It can be just a release from the office announcing
Yes,
that
that's
over the
the
last
intention.
fiscal year, I spent zero in travel. That would be sufficient.
Correct, but Mr. Chair, again, if it's just a press release, then there's no guarantee that it will be published, because that's at the discretion of the newspapers to publish. I'd rather have this conversation on the mic as opposed to
Yes.
off the mic.
As I stated earlier, Mr. Chair, if the information is disseminated through a press release and it's not published, like for instance, you put zero, obviously that would not be published because there's nothing to publish. But if there is something to publish, I'm sure that the distribution would publish it. If not, the intention would be suffice into what he's suggesting. So if it is a press release, the intention is fine with me because there is no cost added to it.
Okay. Senator Nicholas, did you have, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, just in response to that explanation, that's not really what this amendment says, that the intent would suffice. It says it shall publish. So it would seem to me that if you issue a press release and they do not print it, then you are forced to then take out an ad to publish it.
It does say shall.
Mr. Chair, but since the good author of this amendment said that there may be an amendment to this amendment, then I would perhaps ask that you allow me to come back after that amendment is made, just to understand it.
If there's an amendment, of course you will.
Right, and just another comment, Mr. Chair, on the same section is the amount is one thing, right, to publish the amount. I think what's more critical, and it may not have to be published or anything else, but perhaps the changing of how we provide feedback on any trips that are taken. And there is, even though there's a dollar amount, if there was something of substance that was discussed and brought back, that would never be known, and everything would be and any perhaps perception by the public could be persuaded just by the number alone, but really with no justification as to what was really accomplished during any off-island travel. So this only really deals specifically with numbers as opposed to the essence of the importance of the trip. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there an amendment? Oh, any other senators? Senator Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I kind of agree with the dialogue that's been going on between the two retiring speakers. I don't think the intent of the amendment is actually to increase the cost to the people of Guam. I think that the intent is just to increase the transparency. And so just so that it's codified, I guess, in the Budget Act, each member of Legislature shall publish 10 days before the end of each fiscal year the total amount of all government funds that such member used to travel to a newspaper of wide distribution or to the homepage of the Legislature in Guam. That's my amendment.
Or what?
Or to the homepage of the Legislature in Guam.
Okay.
After distribution, just add or to the homepage of the website of the Legislature in Guam.
The St. Nicholas Amendment is to have a newspaper of wide distribution or the Guam Legislature's website. Is any objection to adding the Guam Legislature's website? Or Senator Tomata?
I would actually prefer that, you know, it be published on the legislature's website, insofar as, and not require having to put it in the newspaper, because that's an expenditure of funds. But if we put it in the legislative website in the same way that we publish, you know, who's employed here and how much they're receiving, then put in there a section for travel reports, and if anybody wants details on the trip report, they should be able to just click on that senator's email and say, please provide the committee, the travel report on your travels. But I would prefer that we just make it be published on the legislative website.
All right, so you're amending the entire thing to just have, shall be published in the, there shall be on the Guam Legislature's website a section where travel is reported.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
A point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That would be amendment to the amendment.
We will take a short break. Someone clean this up and decide what you're going to be admitting. All right, we'll bookmark that amendment. We've had the Rodriguez amendment on the floor already. Let's finish it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I've coordinated with Senator St. Nicholas, and so the one we have now that's been circulated makes the changes that addresses the concerns that were raised. So on the first page of the amendment on item 2, we've striking out the word other and including the word additional certifications, so making it clear that it's in addition to the REHS and the RS certifications, that if they place any additional, that there's no additional certifications that will be for those.
Thank you. And there was a second one, there's another one on this second page.
That's
on
right.
6.
On item 6, it is to ensure that the retroactive payment is only from fiscal year 2014. That is when we came back here in 2013 to ensure that everything was clear.
Thank you. Any objection to the amendments as proffered? Senator Espaldon.
Just a question, Mr. Chair, and that would be to the point of the, I guess, the law that was passed in in 2013, and within the law, and I don't have my computer in front of me, so I have to ask the question, right? Within the law, was it there established that incentive pay would be provided?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Tom Addett, did I understand you had an objection, a question? Any objection to this amended? Senator?
Thank you very much. I know it says that there are certain certifications required and any other additional certification. Who determines exactly what these certifications are or that needs to be taken? And is it a annual renewal or every couple of years renewal? Is this just a one-time thing and then that's it? Or those aren't clear to me.
Okay. So there was a couple of questions that the sheet made. The first one is, who makes the determination? So this item here says that public health may determine any additional certifications that will be required for that employee in addition to the registered environmental health specialist and the registered sanitarian. And so the other question, Madam Speaker, was
renewal or recertification?
yes. So it's as long as the employee maintains that certification, then that incentive pay would remain with that employee. So if anyone, if either the registered, the REHS is not obtained, then and you still have the registered sanitarian, you won't be able to receive that pay. You must have both of them, and in addition to any other certification that the department is requiring.
And one more question is there a, I mean, I realize that they'll have it, but is there a requirement of continuing type, education, just like doctors, lawyers, teachers always have to go back and take additional courses for recertification to keep then their certificate, current and active?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Any other questions? Any objection to the Rodriguez Amendment as now circulated? Madam Speaker.
Sorry, just one more on this one. Now that it's been adopted, and I didn't add it here because it wasn't part of the original bill. The original bill did not have the appropriation, and I'm fine to do it in a separate measure because I want to follow the spirit of the ground rules that you've made. But if the chair determines that that we may include the appropriation from those two funds now, then I would yield to you. But if not, I'm fine in doing it in a separate measure that would have a public hearing.
Please.
Okay.
Thank you. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I know we took a recess and we wanted to finish off Section 18, which was the creation of the positions for public office accountability. And I know we had some conversations about the possibility of saying line agencies or semi-autonomous agencies, but that didn't really work out when we were reading the entire language. So the change here instead would be is to add on then just make it the Department of Education, and we made sure then that the post audit is also on the second page is a separate line as well, in which then persons employed by OPA or the DOE in the classified service pursuant to this section shall be subject to post-audit review by the Civil Service Commission within the 100 days of employment. So that's the amended version.
And you have that in writing somewhere?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, they didn't give you a copy?
That'll be bookmarked. Do you have another one?
I do. And it's going to be a new section. Everyone had received a copy yesterday.
You're going to need to speak into the microphone because
Okay,
I can't hear.
it's a new section. I know it says Section 23, but Section 23 is taken so that it's to be renumbered accordingly by legal counsel during engrossment, and is authorization for legal services for the Guam Commission for Certification and the Guam Academy Charter Schools Council. And what this is that the Guam Education Board may, and I put may, I didn't say shall, enter into a memorandum of understanding with, so that's the only thing that's not in the amendment, with the Guam Commission for Certification and the Guam Academy of Charter Schools Council to provide legal and investigatory services to the Guam Commission for Certification and the Guam Academy of Charter Schools. Originally, and I have to give credit to our colleagues here, Senator Ada, and that's where I got the language originally, because we weren't able to secure monies to be able to provide monies to be able to give one particular council to do an investigation. And so then we had to be creative, and sure enough, there was that language in Section 18, the same language. However, the difference is rather than make it to have the MOU with the Attorney General's Office for an Assistant Attorney General, it was just only to have it with the legal counsel of the Guam DOE Board. I had contacted the attorney himself, and at first, yes, he felt he was objecting to it being a memorandum of understanding with the Assistant Attorney General and that there would be this conflict. But for him as the attorney and working basically, I mean, although now, yes, he has the task of dealing with the present issue, but their meetings are once a month, and occasionally they would have a special meeting. And he also felt, and which I didn't think about this at the time, is the how then that one council with a different council, COUNCIL, getting an attorney counsel to assist them could have conflicting or contrary type of policy for the Department of Education. And he said that it would work best under this condition of him providing the assistance to the other two to make sure then, because they're all affected somehow one way or the other, they're all going to be affected. What one does would affect then ultimately the Department of Education. And in trying to make sure that that really doesn't happen, of course, is that we even made the superintendent a member of even the Academy Charter School for that reason, that he has a great, a greater, input in terms of how things are at the department and how then they would be impacted. In this particular case where there is, and it's not something that's going to be every day, it might be once a year. And in this particular case where, I had attempted to try to get some funding for the certification council, is because the department themselves for the first time has actually made a referral. So this is not, something that they just want the luxury of having assistance. It's only on a case-by-case basis, and they have been in existence now, I would say, for over 4 or 5 years, and they've never really needed the assistance of for an investigation or for legal services. So this is one way in which we'll be able to not just creatively come up with a way to be able to help our other smaller type entities, similar to what was done with DPW and by bringing in the Guam Builders permit section, bringing in the Guam Contractors Association, that it really saves a lot of money for the government of Guam, in light, of course, of what you've indicated very early in the budget process, and that this is definitely a creative way to be able to help councils that definitely affect the Department of Education. So I ask my colleagues to look at this very carefully, because it does say may, it didn't say shall, and it's definitely going to end up helping those two other councils that ultimately would impact the Department of Education. Very much, Mr. Chairman.
On the amendment, Senator Underwood. Any other senator after Senator Underwood? Senator San Nicolas. All right. Senator Underwood, you're recognized.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may just yield to the Senator San Nicolas at this point, because I do have an amendment. I'm looking for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Senator San Nicolas, on this amendment to Vice Speaker Wampat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, I view this amendment with concern, and the reason being is that it basically creates a methodology by which new positions may be created and enacted.
You're on the wrong amendment.
I'm looking at.
No, the amendment that's currently on the floor is the Speaker is the DOE.
Okay,
Legal
I'm on the wrong
Services.
amendment.
Yes.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I'm ready.
Madam Speaker, on the Speaker's amendment on legal counsel for the three subsets of GDOE.
Right.
Senator Underwood.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do agree with this amendment to the extent that it will provide some form of support for the Guam Commission for Certification and also the Guam Academy of Charter Schools Council. I am glad that it is a may, that it's a choice between the three. I would just like to add that a statement here after the period, Council, only the last sentence, that the memorandum of agreement, is this memorandum of understanding, will specify the proportionate contribution of each board based on the use of legal services. And that is my amendment. That is because right now, the legal counsel for the Guam Education Board is being funded by the Department of Education. And so that, I believe, will be renegotiated at the end of the fiscal year. And so we just want to ensure that the Department of Education doesn't handle the burden.
I believe they're all within Department of Education.
The Guam certification has a separate budget.
Okay, that one is a separate budget, but the council is within.
That's right.
Okay, just so it's
Yes.
understood that I didn't give them a separate budget. I know there was an attempt to try to even do a travel budget that wasn't never heard and never, so it's not in here. So it's just between GDOE and the Certification Council, Commission.
Right.
And the charter.
I'm sorry, I'm not done yet.
It would be within itself. There is no special, I don't believe there's an appropriation for the council. So what would its contribution be from?
I tried to give the commission a certification also, some money to be able to hire an investigator, and that failed. So therefore, trying to be creative here and following section 15 of page 123, where this has been very successful for the Department of Public Works, the Guam Building Code Council, the Contractors License Board, and the PO's Board. Because that question was asked of me, why are you just picking on DOE and why not other boards? Well, other boards are doing it, and they're very successful. They're all working. They all impact each other, and the language here is exactly the same. And the reason why I say this is because, well, one, for the charter school, the money comes from them. And therefore, the decisions that they make, like a question that was brought up to me by the current legal counsel was the decision where their own board legal counsel made a decision that, we don't have to go through the GovGuam procurement process because, they are a separate council. And so that was something that legal counsel was saying that, no, it shouldn't be. And that should be made clear from the very beginning and would have stopped them dead on its tracks to proceed to try to just spend their money without following the procurement process. The other is that a case has been referred to the certification office, and based on their decision and advice given to them could very well conflict. The department can say, we want this person to no longer be, or to be investigated, and then the other would say, oh, no, there's no need. So, in itself, he said was important as well, that yes, they should really be, having counsel to provide policies like that, they're not going to be in conflict. And I'm only stating, of course, what was relayed to me and how everything that whatever they do, these two councils do, will definitely majorly impact DOE. So this is an alternative approach or cost savings approach to be able to help. And it's not as if though, like I said earlier, the council went for 4 or 5 years without an investigator and attorney. This now they would have a case only because of referral made by the Department of Education. And then, of course, with the charter school, at one time they had that question. We settled it when we did our own oversight, and now things are going smoothly. So it's not as if though it's going to be every month that they need some type of legal advice or counsel. The other is that the council right now has a 4-year contract. And it indicated, and I've indicated to him, of course, that that's only dependent upon availability of funds. That means should the legislature then appropriate the certain amount for legal counsel in their budget, then of course that contract will continue. Otherwise, it's even though you have a 4-year contract and there's no money appropriated, then they'll be hard pressed to be able to continue to secure services from the individual. The other is that the Attorney General's office have basically indicated, because they have gone to the AG's office and they were advised is that it is best for them to work with the legal counsel of the Department of Education, and then what they could do in return is have them send the opinion provided by legal counsel to be then validated by the AG's office, only because should they go to court, the AG then will be ready to respond and defend, of course, the department. Thank you.
Mr.
So
Chairman.
there's an amendment to add a provision of cost sharing. On that amendment,
And I object to that amendment because there's really no funding for the other two to be able to cost share.
all right. So there's an objection. All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, let's address that one first. All those in favor of the Underwood amendment to the Speaker WAMPAT provision, please indicate by raising your hand. Fails. On the main motion, on the main provision? On the
Do I
main
still-
provision.
Yeah, on the main provision. I don't know if I have the correct one here, but on the line, that's the line with the second line to the last line, it states here, Assistant Attorney General to specifically provide legal services. Is this the wrong one? So, no, but the term GDOE, that's already been, so. Do you have it? Okay. May enter. Okay. All right. I just want to go on the record, Mr. Chairman, that the GEB board chair and the vice chair and another board member have shared feedback and concern regarding sharing the just because of that amount of time that the legal counsel spends with them. And so to the extent, though, that this is really an alternative, it's a voluntary memorandum of understanding. I believe that they can work that out among themselves. So I no longer have an objection.
Okay.
Thank you.
So on the WAMPAT provision, any further comments or objections? On the WAMPAT provision, Senator Torres?
I just want to ask the author, I'm a little fuzzy on this. This proposed addition will not compel DOE to eliminate in-house counsel? It will not. It's just a supplement to provide additional services in the event that they need, or to service those other two?
Yes.
Okay, because I did have concerns about the need to have in-house counsel who has, specialized in the area of DOE and the needs of DOE, and I think we also have to be concerned about potential conflicts, if we should eliminate that and all of that. So, okay, there was a comment that you made that led me to think that perhaps we're phasing out one and looking at another, and I just wanted to be sure.
I wanted to say that in my conversation with legal counsel, their legal counsel, is that the Assistant Attorney General would be a conflict of interest. I'm sorry, I should have made that clear. And that it would be best, the request is just make it their legal counsel.
So on the WAMPAT provision, thank you. Senator Uggan?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present a proposed amendment. It's been circulated, and I believe you do have a copy, Mr. Chairman. And it would add a new section, and the verbiage would read, all agencies and departments are authorized to expend their entities' fiscal year 2017 operational funds to settle competitive wage appeals adjudicated by the Department of Administration. So this is
you faded.
Okay, but I read the verbiage. So for
No,
purposes
I
of
understand. I'm just saying you faded on the microphone when you were reading it.
all agencies and departments are authorized to expend their entities' fiscal year 2017 operational funds to settle competitive wage appeals adjudicated by the Department of Administration.
Okay. Everybody have a copy of that? It's 2 lines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, colleagues.
Any comments or objections to this amendment by Senator Agan? Any other miscellaneous provisions? Senator Tommy Morrison, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe all my colleagues have the amendment in front of them. Mr. Chair, I spoke briefly about the ability to address the challenges of, I guess there's one thing to say that of our government's challenges with collecting the revenues owed to the government, but I believe there's another clear factor is how our government settles those transactions appropriately. Mr. Chair, this amendment reflects a significant portion of the policy established in Public Law 30-196. Again, I mentioned earlier, Mr. Chair, that there was good intentions by this policy. However, we're seeing the consequences take place as a result. You see in all our government agencies that collect fees or payments owed to this government. I believe you would only see in our government a scheduled fee structure if you were to spend a certain limit through your credit card. I think we've all seen that. And I don't even think even in our mom and pop stores that you would see such a fee structure like that. I think at the most part they will ask you to at least spend a specific amount if you were to use your credit or debit card. So, Mr. Chair, I'm proposing this amendment. There's great potential to save millions of dollars here just with the information shared in the public hearings that annually this government is getting return checks up to the I believe the amount of $4 to $5 million that was reported at one of these hearings, and I believe there's an audit ongoing on that. I would like to know over the years since this policy has been established, how much money has been collected as a result of these return checks. And there's also an imposed fees on each check that's returned. So those are things that add up. There's also potential, Mr. Chair, as we've seen in our utility agencies, the ability we allow our agencies to explore, negotiate other payment options or options with the existing infrastructures that they have in place. You will see that Waterworks and GPA was able to recently negotiate a flat rate of, I believe, 50 to 60 cents. It's amazing what they did there with that negotiation. So I think that it will allow the Department of Administration, the Office of Technology, Department of Revenue Tax, to allow them to open up, explore with what they have at their existing infrastructure. We all know you can swipe a card up there already, but because of the language that is put in place, it prohibits this government from allowing them to explore other options. So I ask my colleagues to support this measure. I believe in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see with the developments that are taking place with applications, the ability to possibly have a cashless society, the ability to use our smartphones to make these payments as they're already doing throughout Asia. So, Mr. Chair, let's allow our government to open up. We've kind of gone backwards as a result of this policy, and I hope that we can soon eliminate that fee schedule. It bothers me every time I see that because that just shows how far back we've gone. We're seeing those fees up there, and there's no convenience. There's no convenience for anyone having to pay a huge fee because they don't want to use cash. There's no convenience in that. So, Mr. Chair, I ask my colleagues to support this amendment. Thank you.
Okay, the Morrison Amendment requires a report from the Department of Administration no later than December 31st on its efforts and recommendations, including cost. Any objection to the Morrison Amendment? Thank you, Senator. Any other amendments that you wish to add in this section? We're still at the end of miscellaneous provisions. There's still administrative provisions.
How about on page 141? Did you pass it? Regarding the executive branch travel authorized?
No, we're not there yet. We're still on page.
But how did you go to the end of administrative provision when this isn't?
No, we're not in it.
Oh, you're
we're
saying
not.
miscellaneous
Provisions. We're still on page 129. There's an amendment to section 18.
So section 18, we had copies made, and the amendment was theirs to the creation of positions for the Office of Public Accountability and the Department of Education. So the language then throughout was to make sure then that it's DOE rather than just line agencies and semi-autonomous agencies. The other, in the discussion that we had also, was to make sure that the post-audit on the second page, that these individuals normally go through a probationary period, which is like 6 months. So then this section so then they will be subject to a post-audit review by Civil Service Commission within the 100 days of employment. So that's the amendment which comes out of page 125 that has been amended, section 18.
Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and apologies for the previous mix-up on the last amendment. But yes, this is the amendment that I have some concerns with, because it sets up a process for positions to be created and for those positions to be funded. And basically becomes another cost for the government of Guam. Now, what happens, the way this amendment is written, is that the public auditor or the Department of Education may transmit to DOA a list of positions, any position. I mean, it doesn't even specify what kind of position. They can send a list of positions to the Department of Administration, which shall include the grade for each position pursuant to the Competitive Wage Act, and the placement of grade and step shall follow the prescribed methodology of DOA. When DOA receives that position from DOE or the public auditor, they have a certain amount of time to act, and DOA has to accept or deny the position that's requested. If they accept the position that's requested, it becomes a position to be filled in the government of Guam. If DOA rejects the position, DOE or the public auditor can take it to arbitration with the Civil Service Commission, and the results of the arbitration are binding. So we're basically creating a mechanism by which new positions can be created in the Department of Education or in the public auditor's office. There isn't really a limit on what those positions are or how many that there may be. And we're creating a process by which those positions can be created, and then those vacancies can be filled. And it also lists here upon transmittal of such new position, DOE or the public auditor shall post on their websites for public review of the proposed changes. So, I mean, it's like we're creating a mechanism by which new positions can be created, they can be advertised, and then when they're created, they can be filled. And I'm just concerned that, I mean, just the payroll implications here are pretty substantial. perhaps I can request guidance on whether or not this is consistent with how positions are created throughout the government, and whether or not we should put some kind of limitation on what kind of positions we're going to be talking about with respect to both of these agencies, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator. The initial amendment was in there because it was discussed at the public hearing with the public auditor. But with the public auditor, it was a very limited number of employees that it had. This new amendment, adding Department of Education, as you correctly pointed out, it could be teachers, it doesn't limit it to just auditors. I know DOE wanted to include its auditors, but the way that this is written doesn't just limit it to auditors. It could be any position within Department of Education if DOE doesn't respond in a timely fashion to whatever it is the DOE is sending it. It could be reclassifying its janitors. It is too open-ended. I mean, I allowed for it because I knew someone was going to be moving for the public auditor at some point. I've been holding off on it for like 3 budgets now, and we finally discussed it publicly, but this DOE ones hadn't been discussed. And now the way that this is written, it's too open-ended, as you pointed out. It's 3,000 positions at DOE that could possibly be sent in this way. And so either we go back to the original way that it was done and then deal with DOE later but just deal with one at a time. This attempt to try to do everybody at one time makes it...
Mr. Chair, can I also add quickly to the conversation that the Attorney General was also asking for a similar provision, but we've all agreed that that should be handled through a standalone bill.
Correct. Thank you very much.
That was your ruling, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's a valid question. Initially, when several of my colleagues, when we had discussed this, it was specifically for the accountants as well in the Department of Education. So it is a limited number. I didn't mean for it to be broad to 3,000 across, the board. And I would agree for that. If we were going to talk about the entire positions, you're right. I would rather put that as a standalone bill because it definitely needs to be addressed. I've had the conversation with them about it.
So will you withdraw this amendment?
No, I was just going to add the word in auditors, Department of Education auditors. Because it's not for everybody, it's just the auditors. Because we're talking about the Office of Public Accountability, those are the auditors. It will be the auditors as well within DOE. Unless you still think that somehow it's going to have that, broad impact as well. And I mean, I would go on your advice. Are you suggesting then that I withdraw this amendment and keep Section 18 intact? I mean, Mr. Chairman, I don't want it to impact the budget, of course, and I will go on your guidance. So, okay, so I'm getting the word here, so I will withdraw then the amendment.
Mr. Chair, if I may, because before she withdraws it, if she can keep it, but perhaps if the discussion is to remove DOE and separate it, then that would be fine, because I think there's certain things here I would like to amend as well. There's a strike through on the original amendment that references the third-party study as support, and I would like to reinstate that so that when the OPA does send down these positions for review, that it references a report that we paid for, the taxpayers paid for.
Senator Nicholas, and then Speaker.
Well, on that suggestion, Mr. Chairman, I mean, the way the amendment that's being proposed by the speaker is written is she has a strike through of that, and then a couple lines down she has an underline of new language that's being inserted that says the placement of grade and step shall follow the prescribed methodology of DOA. And so the way I'm interpreting the amendment as intended is that it's being very specific that we're not going to be allowing a third-party study to determine these the compensation levels. We're going to allow them to be determined based on the prescribed methodology of DOA. And so that's, I think, the reason why that's stricken through and that new language is added. It's to make sure that we don't just take any kind of third-party study and implement it. And one of the reasons I've heard over the years is the concern of doing that is basically then anybody can go and procure their own study and then come down and almost use that study to compel a wage adjustment that isn't consistent with a uniform study that is being adopted by the government of Guam. So I think maybe the amendment as proffered is actually better with respect to how it addresses how the compensation methodologies are determined. But again, I still want to reiterate my concern about the open-endedness of the education provisions in the amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Chairman. And I do take to heart, of course, the concerns and exactly what it will do. And I know that I've been communicating with DOA for the last 4 years already on this, and even recently. And I think it's something that we need to do and probably have a standalone bill, because seriously, when we spoke to the group that came out here to do the Hay study, I have brought to their attention that the Department of Education really needs to be looked at very differently from the others, because not in every department and agency are there teachers, certificated professionals, and that they needed to be addressed, separately. And although they did a good job for the entry level, they surely didn't help those who are, more senior in the ranks. So I will go ahead and I want to do a withdrawal of this amendment, but I would like to proffer at least on the second page, because that is not in the original section.
You're withdrawing your
You're
amendment,
right.
so there's no second page. We're back to page 125 and 126.
You're right.
Okay,
So then,
are you withdrawing your two-page amendment?
yes.
Thank you.
But
Any objection?
what I'd like for you to look on that second page, though, which was to fix this here, is what you have, because you don't have the language here of the post-audit. You have here failure to act on request. That's the last one, B, on page 127, is just to add a section there on the post-audit, that then a person's then employed by OPA in the classified position pursuant to this section shall be subject to post-audit review by the Civil Service Commission within 100 days of employment.
Okay, so what you're proposing is on page 127, add a new section,
Yes.
subsection,
I don't know,
with
subsection.
these words.
You're right. And that was what a conversation we had with, the chair about making sure that language is put in as a separate section, separate paragraph to that section.
So that we don't have to burn another.
No, please
Forest.
don't burn another paper.
Just to be clear,
Yes.
go ahead, Mr. Chair, could you read out what that amendment would be?
That amendment on page 127 would be after line 3, add a new line, post-audit. Persons employed by the OPA in the classified service pursuant to this section shall be subject to post-audit review by the Civil Service Commission within 180 days of employment. So we'll just take out the DOE one mentioned there. Okay? Anybody? Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
On that same section, now that the speaker withdrew her amendment, I'm going to go back to the concern that I had registered yesterday about where we're talking about creating new positions. right? And so I've talked about the position of the public auditor, being, it's not a, and this was discussed during the public hearing as well in the past 4 years or so that this issue has been coming up. And so just want to, I think I would need to make an amendment to strike the word new and just reference positions of the OPA so that if we look at that study that this amendment references, it does include the position of the public auditor as well. And so we want to make sure that that's also included in this authorization for them to be able to submit to DOA, that the position of the public auditor is included in that authorization.
Senator Espadon.
Mr. Chair, I'm not really sure what that's. I didn't follow that reasoning.
The effect of that would be to accept the study that was done by the Office of the OPA. What's the name of that study?
Leading Edge.
Leading Edge study. What it would do, it would change her salary from what was in the Competitive Wage Act. We did leave the public auditor out. Not we. When we passed on November the 22nd of 2014, the increases for elected officials. Unfortunately, the public auditor was not in it. That was not us that did that. And so all we needed, her salary was not increased along with all the other elected officials at that time. This amendment and this study would propose a completely different salary than what was in that study, in the Competitive Wage Act, the Hay report. In the Hay, her salary, the public auditor was to go up to 110. In the Leading Edge study, the salary of the public auditor would be equal to that of a Superior Court judge. 138.
And since the judiciary has the discretion to set their own salaries, every time that the judges' salaries go up, would there be a corresponding increase in the salary?
Correct. So maybe an amendment here to just have the public auditor as per the Competitive Wage Act. One line.
I wouldn't mind taking a look at that, Mr. Chairman. I just don't know enough about it to do that. And again, whether it's a brief recess to try to perhaps work, or we have another senator who might have a solution, or who might have some input that might shed light.
Okay. Senator McCready and then Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, if we go back 2 budgets ago, this is the amendment that we originally proffered, which 3/4 of that amendment made it through, and then this was the part of the amendment that was strike, correct? Remember, we did that about 2 budgets, I believe it's 2 budgets ago, where the public auditor was asking for a little more autonomy in hiring, and then she was also asking for, because they had a separate, they didn't have a Hay study
Yes.
done. They had
what this is doing is not so much adopting the Leading Edge study, but it is stating that the public auditor will, pursuant to this authority, submit to the Department of Administration and to the public auditor's credit. She has been trying to comply with the way that it can and should be done,
Yes.
and DOA just isn't responding. So the suggestion was to provide timelines that if DOA doesn't respond within a certain time, that it can move forward. That's the compromise that's being proposed in this. It's not so much adopting leading edge as much as it's saying they can propose leading edge recommendations. DOA can and should respond, and their failure to respond will allow the OPA to move forward with the reclassification of their employees, which should be the responsibility of the Department of Administration. But their failure to act necessitates some kind of time limitations to force them to do something.
So we're basically going to give, the amendment would be to give them their own autonomy when it comes to these decisions.
It's not. It's just directing them to do something within a certain time. And if they don't do it, if Department of Administration doesn't respond, then they can move forward. I'm hoping that this will force Department of Administration to say, yes, we understand your study says this is how much it should be. We, in our HR capability, say it should be this, at least as a response. The problem has been it's been 3 years and no response. And the addition of a post audit is once that's done, then there should be a post audit by Civil Service Commission to make sure that everything's okay, to review everything.
So you said that there has not been a response in 3 years. So if this amendment were to pass, do we reset the clock for a response time, or are we going back 3 years and using that start date, or does their response time start from the day it gets passed?
From the day we pass.
Okay.
Senator Nicholas.
Just point of inquiry, I guess, Mr. Chairman. Does any other agency have the authority to pursue reclassifications in this manner?
Just the autonomous agencies.
The autonomous agencies are able to pursue this through the Department of Administration for the reclassification of their employees?
Through their own boards.
Yeah,
I mean,
they have their own.
The port has their own Cyril, and GPA and GWA has their own.
The autonomous agencies have their own hiring procedures.
Right.
But every other agency that has a hiring procedure which involves the Department of Administration is not able to avail of this process, only the public auditor, by virtue of what we're passing here?
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's a little concerning as far as equity goes. And my second concern is in Section 2, where we have the Civil Service Commission serving as the arbiter of proceedings between the OPA and DOA. Has the Civil Service Commission been the arbiter of a requested reclassification that was rejected by DOA? Has the Civil Service Commission, has there ever been an agency that submitted a reclassification to DOA that got rejected, that was able to go to civil service and get it arbitrated for some kind of resolution?
As I understand it, under the CWA, all of the issues with the Hayes study are supposed to be done by Department of Administration. And you've asked the question of the HR division when and if they will ever come out with their report on the teachers, I believe was your question to them, right. Which is thousands of employees that they've not done anything yet
right.
about.
Well, what we're doing here in this entire section is we're saying the OPA can initiate a process utilizing a third-party study. If DOA doesn't give them what they want, they can go to civil service, and civil service has to arbitrate based on a third-party study. I mean, first, we're allowing them to use a third-party study, which no other agency that has to go through DOA is able to do. And then secondly, we're creating a process by which DOA must be compelled to respond. And then third, we're creating an adjudication process for them to be able to have their third-party study evaluated for whether or not it should be applied with civil service. It looks like we're granting a very, very special kind of treatment with respect to the ability for an agency to reclassify its personnel that's under the same employment rules and regulations as every other agency that must go through the Department of Administration. And so I'm concerned that in doing this, are we going to be opening up the potential for other agencies to say, hey, how come they can do that in our unified pay scale, but I can't go and do that under the same unified pay scale? That's actually, I mean, the more I think about it, the more problematic it sounds.
Your questions are very valid, and if memory serves me right, I thought that certain of you were actually going to be the ones that made the amendment to adopt the leading edge.
I think that's the cleaner way.
At one point. And so, but that would give a department the ability to be able to go out and do its own study. And what I was trying to do was, we had barely adopted the Hay CWA, and already we were breaking off from it, which was the reason why I fought it for so long.
I think the underlying question here is the OPA under the unified pay scale of the government of Guam?
Yes.
Then we cannot be accepting third-party studies. We really cannot. Otherwise, every single agency can go out and do its own third-party study, and if we do this for one entity that's under the unified pay scale, we open ourselves up to lawsuits from every other individual and every other agency who wants to have their own pay scale reviewed by a third party. Colleagues, I would actually strongly suggest that we step back 10 steps and we actually probably motion to strike the entire Section 18 until we can get the Attorney General to really give us clarity as to whether or not, if we do this under our unified pay scale, are we opening up ourselves to something that we can never close the door on again?
I would support that motion. I was just trying to find, otherwise there had been movements to try, and I thought even that you were actually going to be one of the ones that was going to introduce the leading edge one. And this was trying to at least keep it within Department of Administration.
I think if we're going to entertain what the auditor wants, we need to first, by statute, extricate her from the unified pay scale. And then from there, we can do whatever we want with respect to other studies. But to keep them under the unified pay scale and allow them the special privilege of utilizing third-party studies for their wage determinations, then everyone who's under the unified pay scale must be entitled to the same opportunity. And that will become incredibly problematic for the government of Guam. So unless there's another motion on the floor, Mr. Chairman,
yeah, just a point of information, if I may, because I think he's getting ready to make an amendment. Mr. Chair, if memory serves me right, in some documents that I've been reviewing, because I was one of them that were looking into this, is that this body had actually, in several budget hearings ago, had asked the OPA to commission a third party study. So, if memory serves me right, I don't know. I mean, that's what I remember, and I can go back and come back to this body and report that. But that's number one. That's what I remember. Number two is that I think to address the concerns, and the retiring speaker is right, is that the concerns about are we opening it up now to other agencies. I understand the concern. However, this body again has created this special office, elected position, an elected office that we're saying is kind of an independent I mean, we should say it's an autonomous agency, because in the creation of that office, we've said that it's going to be an independent office, elected office. And so over the, I think it's 14 years now that the office has been established, we're seeing the things now, and things are in the process of it really ensuring that it is an autonomous, it is independent from the executive branch of the government, because that's where the auditor was prior to us creating that that elected office. And so that's where I think to shed some light on the discussion and some of the concerns. And what you've done here, Mr. Chairman, in that you've including it here, and having DOA part of the process, I think is something that we should recognize and appreciate. Because if we had come out, any of us have come out with a bill, separate bill to adopt it, then DOA would not be part of that process. It would just simply to move to adopt it. But I think what you're doing here keeps it within DOA, uses that third-party report that, again, I must say that the people of Guam paid for, and uses that as a support for the auditor, for the OPA to be able to argue the positions that she wants reviewed. At the end of the day, if DOA comes back and says, look, we don't agree with those positions or those pay, then there's still a process for that to be adjudicated. And so I would recommend that we keep this amendment that you have put forward. And the only thing I'm asking is that we include the position of the public auditor as well, because as you have said earlier, that position was not part of the rate, the salary adjustments that were made for all elected officials. So she was that position, that elected position was the only position not included in what we have done for all the other elected positions.
Thank you. As I was listening to the conversation, and one of our colleagues had asked the question whether the salary then, not talking about person, we got to talk about just the position and salary, regardless who's sitting in there, but that it was linked to, like you said, the Superior Court judge position, and I think maybe that, as suggested, is that could be reflected here. However, not, of course, pursuant to what happens with the judges, so that if that happens, because it's a totally separate branch versus this particular office, that increase then will be that increase until such time again that there's another, Hays study or legislatively it is done. I don't know how to put that in an amendment form, because I don't have the actual language of the Superior Court. If everything that the previous speaker had said to ensure the inclusion then, and to have the salary reflected, but without it being tied to the Superior Court.
Let's take a break, and we'll break for lunch. Everybody back at 2.